Hello and welcome to another edition of From the Pastor's Heart. Today I'd like to talk with you about a season in the church that is precious to many, but for others it's one that is almost unknown, and that's the season of Advent. I grew up in I came to when I was young. I went to an Episcopal church in San Diego, and I left there when I was in third grade, so I don't really remember a whole lot of things. I remember that, purple and different colors and stuff like that, and I mainly remembered the time when it was purple, and there would be a little veil on the cross when they walked it down, which later found out was Lent. And then, of course, Easter was all white, and it was an incredible time. And that was really about the only thing I really understood about the seasons of the church. And then when I was working in the Drake Edwards Chapel when I was in the Army, we did a Catholic service and we had a Protestant service, so we had two different churches that met in the same building, and I was responsible for the various logistics for the service. So I would set up the services and that. And I found out that there was this thing called the seasons of the church, and that we would change the colors. And so, especially for daily mass, we would have to find out what color it was and put the vestments out for the priest. But on Sundays, we would have to we would change the colors from red or green or purple or white or whatever. And Advent was a time of purple, and Lent, of course, is purple as well. And the idea behind the color is that it was a time of expectation, whereas Lent was a time of reflection and meditating on the reality of Jesus giving his life for us. And then, of course, Easter was white and the lilies and everything else. And it was a major celebration, but it was a time of reflection, and it was a very somber time. And then Advent is also a time of purple. The colors of Advent are purple. And I guess unless you're Lutheran, then it's blue, but it's more of a somber color. And in Advent is a time when we reflect on the miracle of God coming to earth. And so each of the Sundays of Advent reflect on something different. So the first Sunday that we just celebrated this last week was the first Sunday of Advent, which was the candle of hope. And in that reflection, or in the message, or in the thing that you would think about in the first Sunday, the first week of Advent, is the fact that, that as John said, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. Because there was a time when the people were in the Old Testament, they were looking forward. They were looking forward to Messiah to come. And so throughout the Hebrew Scriptures, God lays out a roadmap for us of who Messiah was going to be, so that there would be no mistake when he came. And so we know that he was going to be born of a woman. We know that from Genesis chapter 3, that he was going to be the one who was going to right the wrong that was done in the garden. And now that's all we know about him. He's going to be a human being, he's going to come from a woman, and he's going to ultimately defeat the serpent. But we don't know where he's coming from. And so we work our way through Genesis until we get to Genesis chapter 12, and we find that God is calling a man by the name of Abram in the land of Ur. And he tells Abram, he gives him a royal grant. He says, Abram, if you will leave your where you are, your family, and everything that you know, and go to a place that I will show you, I will give you some incredible promises that will be yours and your children's for all eternity. I'm going to give you land, I'm going to give you seed, and I'm going to make you a blessing. And of course, ultimately, he says, the entire world will be blessed through you. And so we see that this promise that was given to Eve in Genesis 3, now we see that he's going to come from the people group, or the nation that was founded by Abraham. And then, of course, as we continue in Genesis, we find that it went from Abraham down through Isaac. And from Isaac, it went to Jacob. And then we know that Jacob had 12 sons. And so up until Jacob, the blessing, or the double portion, And the birthright, which was the leadership of the clan, was all invested in one person. So from Abraham to Isaac, Isaac to Jacob, they got all, one person got that. Well, Jacob split it up. And so he gave the blessing to Joseph. And that's why when you're looking in the Old Testament, you see Ephraim and Manasseh. You don't see Joseph because Joseph got the double portion with his two sons. But the leadership and the one of whom the king would come, the Lion from Judah, is going to come from Judah, the fourth son. And so what we find is that God is now showing us that this promise, this promised seed who is going to undo the curse and bring about salvation, is going to come from the woman, and then down, we narrow it down to Abraham, then to Isaac, and then to Jacob, and then finally to Judah. So now we know he's going to come from Judah. And so all throughout the rest of the Hebrew Scriptures, they are talking a little bit more, they're unveiling a little bit more about what we know about this king to come, and we're going to call him Messiah. And in fact, Isaiah, it's a verse that many of us read the first Sunday of Advent, where he talks about who this Messiah, who this king is, where it says, "For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given. The government will be upon his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." And then he goes on to say, "Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end, and he will reign on David's throne." Now, why David's throne? Well, because God promised we have from Judah, then we work our way down, and then we have David, who was qualified to be king. And God made a promise with David, another royal grant, that said that Messiah is going to come from you, that the king of Israel will always come from your line, David, from your kingly line. And that is who Isaiah is referring to in that incredible passage in Isaiah chapter 9. And then we see different pictures of him. And so by the time Jesus comes on the scene, we have had thousands of years of promises. And we have this hope that the people of God have, that God is going to bring a king who is going to ultimately bring about salvation. And folks, that's what we celebrate on Christmas. It's not just this wonderful story of Jesus being born in Bethlehem in a manger. We'll talk about that next week. But it's the culmination of thousands of years of promise, of the hope that God's people have that God would fulfill and keep his promises. And so I would encourage you this Advent season to stop and think about the fact that what we celebrate is the culmination of thousands of years of waiting. Thousands of years of people wondering, is this child the one? Because Jesus is. And so it's so easy for us to get overwhelmed with parties and with preparations and with buying gifts and having family come in, that we can lose the magnitude of the moment. And that is the realization that God came to earth. And so I just pray that as you are celebrating, that you would keep that first and foremost in your mind. Put together that Advent wreath, look at the creche, marvel at what happens at the manger. But remember that Christmas reminds us that God is faithful. And if God will be faithful throughout the centuries, then we can be rest assured in the fact that he will be faithful to us as well. So I pray that as you begin this Advent season, that you have, again, an amazing time, that you don't overwork, you don't overspend, you don't overthink, and you just revel in the magic of God coming to earth. And so I thank you for making it to the end today, listening to me ramble. I pray that you have an amazing time with your siblings in Christ as you worship him this week. And I look forward to seeing you again in a future video. God bless you all.